listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. The intimacy of small ensemble acapella singing presented by some of the most in-demand seasoned choristers in town makes Proximus 5 ones to watch and most especially hear. Your next opportunity to indulge in their glorious sound is this weekend in a candlelit concert of classic Christmas carols and new arrangements. 2/5 of the group, Scott Reimer and Paul Bruch-Wiens, have joined me in studio to chat more. Welcome back to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you here, especially fresh off your international debut.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the tour to the U.S. Midwest?
Oh, it was big.
It was so big.
Tell us more, Paul.
We drove for 12 hours on Friday, got to Iowa, sang in the space at 9 p.m. So we were in Kelowna, Iowa, singing with Bad Angle Events. They billeted us in a 5-bedroom cabin or house. It was amazing. Yeah. And like the best billets. And then we sang on Saturday and then we drove back on Sunday. It was a whirlwind tour for one show. Totally worth it.
In this beautiful hall, I might add, that reminded me a lot of Bueller Hall at MCI in Gretna.
Okay, so I was curious. Just to clarify for listeners, we're talking about Kelowna in Iowa,
Yes.
not Kelowna
Thank
in
you.
BC.
Thank you.
Admittedly, it's not near the top of my travel list or my travel radar. What took you there?
Well, there's a huge Mennonite connection there. And James Magnus-Johnson, who's in our group as well, he knew the son of one of the organizers, and that just started the conversation about 18 months ago. And not so fun fact, Kelowna had a tornado go through about a year ago, and the people that were organizing the event lost their heritage home. And so they still wanted to move forward with organizing these events because they felt like the community really needed it. And so they stayed in touch, and it just happened.
Well, and I mean, especially thinking about what y'all do, the 5 of you singing together, I mean, you bill yourself as ones who perform in a sort of restorative fashion, and it seems so appropriate that you could be there and offer at least a little bit of that sort of musical hug, if you will, to these people. And I mean, you also get to add international performers to your list, which I think is pretty cool. Performing south of the border, you've returned back home to Winnipeg now, getting ready for another holiday concert. And just to remind the listeners of your origin story, this is a group that formed during the pandemic days, a group of pals coming together to keep connection and musical proximity, hence the name, right, Scott?
That's right. We were trying to figure out, what do we call this group of guys that are singing in a backyard or whatever we were allowed to do at the time, and kicked around a whole bunch of options and landed on Proximus. In fact, we even went through a bunch of different names after that, and then we just came back to it and said, you know what, this is the one that really seems to suit. We actually thought early on of adding a 6th voice so that we could call ourselves Proximus 6 in honor of the 6 feet distance, but didn't end up happening. We were happy with our 5. So
Happy with the 5, and the others include Dan Rochegood, James Magnus-Johnson, just mentioned, and Jereme Wall. You're all so actively involved in the choral community here in town. What's special about singing in 5-part, Paul?
I always wanted to do something like this, and when we think about forming groups, singing together, I always think about scratching my own itch, and this was a big itch that I had. And it just so happened, I feel like the other 4 also had this in them. They wanted to do this very badly. And so it just was better suited for me at my point in my career, where this is really something I was focused on. Yep.
Scott, you've done a lot of arranging for the group, and I mean, that just has me thinking about 5 singers. Is there anything particularly challenging about writing for this makeup? Or I guess the other way to look at it, are there any like unique opportunities that writing for 5 individual voices present?
well, the great thing is that I know the exact voices that I'm working with. That's the big thing. I've done a lot of arranging in the past, and then you kind of have to stick to certain ranges for the different voice types. You know, basses don't go below a G or maybe an F, but I know that Jereme can go down to a C for sure. And so I can throw that in there and know that it's going to be sung in it with great tone. Same thing, I know Dan's voice, I know his limitations, but I also know how to like draw out the best of him. So it's been really fun to write for this group because I know the voices.
I imagine we're going to be hearing an arrangement or two of yours on Saturday at the concert. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, we've got three on this, three of my pieces. The first one you'd hear, actually, well, it's a set, but we sang this back at the Winnipeg Baroque Festival in April. It's my setting of Handel's, actually, it's Surely He Hath Borne Our Griefs from Messiah, and I called it Truly. And again, just a reworking. It's quite different. It's quite stark and haunting, I would say, and not really a Christmas song, but also with the idea of Christ on the cross and the whole reason that he came to earth, which we celebrated Christmas. That leads nicely into Veni Veni Emmanuel, which I arranged last year. We actually performed it at our Christmas show last year in December. Again, that one especially I got to write for our 5 voices, and I think it's a really fun, well, fun's not the right word, but it's a really interesting journey through that piece. I can't remember if I used all the verses. I think maybe only 5 of the verses.
But he did dedicate it for my Proximus brothers,
That's
I think
right.
is what it says at the
That's
top.
right.
Very beautiful indeed.
And then the third one, which is near the end of the show, is actually a song that I wrote, I was about 10 years ago now. It's published with Cypress, and it's actually getting picked up around North America. It's a Weird Sisters tune called Solstice Carol. And I arranged that / added a bunch of my own new material to it. And so we'll be doing that one. That's like high energy, very rhythmic, and with a,
You know, one thing when it comes to Proximus 5, and I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about, but is that it seems like any music is fair game. Like you really run the gamut. Paul, what's that like when you're putting together a concert where you could literally do whatever you want, as long as it's for 5 voices?
So I would say 25 years ago, all I wanted to do was Baroque music. And now we reflect 25 years forward, and I'll do anything. So it's awesome to be able to put together a mixed program that sort of touches on, not every genre, but many genres that are out there that you would expect classically trained singers to sing.
What else is on the program? Are there any like festive favorites that you yourself just need to hear this time of year?
I'll let Scott take that one.
well, I'm a big fan of Sussex Carol and the Wexford Carol, some of those tunes. So we're doing those. And actually, just to comment on the last thing, like when you've got so much variety to choose from, so many different genres, I mean, the difficult part is really finding a theme and then drawing pieces, because there's just so much to choose from. So we've got Talus next to some pentatonic stuff,
and then
as one would,
and then you'll have 4-part stuff that you try to arrange a 5th part for, which makes it unique, or you'll have 7-part stuff that you try to condense into 5-part, which also makes that a unique setting.
And speaking of unique settings, you're doing this at All Saints Anglican, surrounded by candles. It's going to be a very beautiful evening, eh?
Beautiful. Can't wait.
Great venue.
Very
fantastic venue.
And a wonderful acoustic too, right?
Yes.
Which is so important, especially when you're talking about 5 singers, because there is an intimacy to that sound. Y'all can pump that sound out, but when there is 1 per part, there is that sort of, you are limited numbers, right? And so to have a space that sings the way that does, it just sounds like it's going to be a beautiful evening. Carols and Candles. The concert is called this Saturday, December 9th, 7 p.m. More details, classic107.com under the events tab, or head to Prox5, that's Prox, and then the number 5.ca. We're going to wrap up this conversation with your Veni Veni setting here, Scott. Scott, Paul, thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.